Look, so he spent years researching the connection between cannabis and chronic pain. Our guest in studio now is Dr. Mark Weir. He's a family physician on leave, a researcher, and an advocate for medical cannabis. I said cannabis deliberately because just before I said, is there a difference between cannabis and marijuana? I don't think he has time to tell us the story, but there isn't. But it's just interesting what some people call it.
The origin of the name. Good morning, Dr. Weir.
Good morning.
I can't say welcome to Jamaica because you went to the University of the West Indies here.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
And
you're a bit of 92.
Yeah, and you're,
MBBS.
And you're a bit of a Caribbean man.
My mother's Guyanese, grew up in Jamaica. Yeah, part of my soul still lives here.
Ah. You're in Montreal now.
I am.
Medical marijuana, which is what you're doing. This is not about recreational smoking weed type of thing. But having said that, are there any healing properties in marijuana if you just smoke it?
There are compounds in the flower of cannabis that have been found over the last few years to be extremely effective in the management of certain conditions. Pain, spasticity, muscle spasm, nausea, and appetite stimulation. And these ingredients in the flower of cannabis have been shown to have these properties. The trick is to get them in a way that can be healthy, that can be less risk. Smoking is associated with certain, I mean, you're burning the plant, you're inhaling smoke, you're inhaling other compounds that are probably not good for your lungs. So finding other ways to administer it is part of the responsibility.
So you kind of don't encourage just smoking weed?
We're exploring all sorts of different ways.
So
we don't encourage it.
Weed is not marijuana. Weed is what you pull out the bad stuff in the
No,
ground.
he knows what I mean.
Smoking marijuana or smoking the herb, you know, is the preferred.
Not for me.
We've already said 5 different names for the same thing.
Right,
Cannabis is actually the scientific term. Cannabis sativa is the name scientifically of the flower. The active ingredients inside are called cannabinoids, which is a hard one to say, but you can, especially with new braces.
Cannabinoids.
Very nice, very nice. Cannabinoid. And those cannabinoids, you have different ones. You have THC, which is the psychoactive one, which is why people get high. It's also one of the most well-studied therapeutic cannabinoids, pain, spasticity, nausea, and so on.
The THC.
THC, tetrahydrocannabinol.
Okay.
CBD now, this is a really interesting one. This has been found in the hemp this is another kind of cannabis. Cannabis sativa, same family, but hemp is now one which we've grown for thousands of years for the fiber, for seed, for making paper and ropes. And 100 years ago, our forefathers and mothers used to use hemp all the time. And now we're rediscovering this very interesting plant. This one now, the flower of hemp, contains CBD, which is cannabidiol, another cannabinoid, but has anti-inflammatory properties, anti-seizure. It was just approved in the US for treating children with epilepsy.
Yes.
So this is the kind of range of compounds we're talking about.
But we've also seen in Jamaica, it's now on the market. I've seen it there are different companies here that have it in the pharmacies. Now, I've seen the oil. I purchased the oil, the rub. What research is there to say that it definitely works, such as the oil? The CBD spectrum, what is that called? The
CBD is one end, of THC is on the other end, and the spectrum of different compounds in the flower. So we're looking at different qualities of these compounds. CBD, you have to think of 3 things. You have to think of the quality of the product. Where is it coming from? What's in it? And how do you know that what they say is on the label? And this is what the regulators, and part of my role coming here to Jamaica is to meet with the drug regulatory agencies, the Ministry of Health, find out how are they regulating these products coming into the island? What is the requirement to sell CBD here? And then there's the safety. Is it safe? Does it contain anything that it shouldn't, that is dangerous for health, or is it being consumed in a way? And then finally, efficacy. What is the evidence that this is treating? And there's very little proof scientifically that topical CBD creams, the stuff you buy and rub on your knees, has effects. We may feel like it has an effect, but there's a strong placebo possibility. Just rubbing a nice oil on your knees might feel nice.
Is that because not enough research has been done with that kind of
cannabinoid. I told you it was I told you it was But that's why I'm here. I want to stimulate research. We need information. Consumers need to know when they buy it, what they're getting, and they need to know what the effect is. And doctors who are recommending or considering recommending for their patients have to know what is the evidence for you to use this in a safe and effective way.
We had a long chat before you came on, and I asked the question outside about, I've heard of cannabis for millions of years, but all of a sudden it seems the last couple of years it's just weed all over the place. Why?
It's what I call a renaissance. It's a rediscovery of cannabis. Remember 100 years ago and beyond, when you look back at history, you realize cannabis had a place in our, 100 years ago, European doctors were giving it to the Queen for her menstrual pains. So we know that historically it was used a long time. Of course, culturally, we know here in Jamaica, the Rasta community celebrating the herb for many, and this has been going on for thousands of years.
Yes.
In the last 100 years, cannabis has been suppressed. Yes. There's been a prohibition applied to it. It's been illegal to possess, illegal to grow, to traffic, to move around the country.
And many black men have been incarcerated because of it and messed up their life. So it's caused a lot of problems, and now it's legalized.
Right. Well, and the prohibition did not control the use of cannabis. It continued in spite of illegality, criminal penalties. The people were locked up disproportionately. Minority people were being locked up. So this prohibition model was clearly not working. And Canada, just in the last few years, began to open up medicinal access because patients were reporting benefit. And then just last year, in October 2018, Canada legalized cannabis across the board for recreational and medical purposes because it was clear that that prohibition model wasn't working. And now by legalizing, regulating, allowing access, but controlling and educating and teaching people about when the risk, how to do it safely, not for young people to do, but there's an adult activity. And this is a different model of looking. But it's really just going back to how it was 100 years ago.
You mentioned about the rub that Empress said she used. What about the other stuff? Are there specific ailments that you can prove that if you inhale it or if you use the CBD, it will cure you?
Cure is a big word in medicine. There's very few things that will cure conditions. There are a lot of claims around cannabis that it has been used in many, many conditions. If you do a survey, if we were to run a survey of your listeners, say, have you things that you've heard or have used cannabis for? Anxiety, sleep, Alzheimer's disease,
glaucoma,
who knows, hundreds of conditions. And we haven't had the ability, because of the prohibition, to study many of them. We're now beginning to pick those up. But it's going to take years before we can study every single one of these conditions. Right. So we have to pick the major ones, the ones where people are suffering the most.
But epilepsy,
epilepsy is one.
Research,
we see this chronic pain, people suffering with pain, and they're taking, opioid medications, morphine. They're taking strong drugs which have nasty side effects. Cannabis is now another possible option to managing pain.
It doesn't prove to cure, but it proves to
manage symptoms. Yeah, I think this is probably right now we're talking about cannabis and cannabinoids as a possible therapeutic addition for managing symptoms which are not responding to standard therapy.
Even you missed out one of them, doctor. Where?
Yes,
an aphrodisiac.
Oh.
An aphrodisiac.
I wouldn't know.
You didn't know? So I heard. Moving on, where is the Jamaican industry with research? From what you're seeing with your experience in Canada, where are we and where do you see us going?
I'm here to find out.
Okay.
I arrived yesterday. I'm spending a very short visit this time. I hope it's the first of many return visits. But to better understand what is the state of play, what is the University of the West Indies doing around cannabis research? I hear UTEC is doing work. There are companies here. You hear a lot of chat in Canada about what's happening in Jamaica. It's obviously a very interesting region and an interesting place to understand what's going on. But I'm here to understand what's really going on. What are the runnings?
Well, make sure you connect with Dr. Knife at the University of the West Indies.
Indeed.
Dr. Knife is one of the very key instrumental, on the ground kind of Rasta lecturers that you need to speak to, and Dr. Andre Horton as well, with Scarce Commodity. Young people who have some insight from all levels. I know you want to do baseline from the great grassroots up onto the policymakers, right?
It's not your area of expertise, obviously, but there was a discussion just a couple of days ago that we're not reaping the benefits financially, so it doesn't help our economy. What about in Canada? What's the talk about that in Canada?
It's early days in Canada, and again, as you say, it's not really I'm not an economist, and the business side I leave to others to manage, but it's clear that when you move an industry from an illicit economy, where cannabis was entirely illegal and all that money is flowing into the illicit underground economy, and you move it into a licit market, suddenly you have the ability to generate tax revenues, you have the ability for that money to now enter the licit economy and be used to, we're seeing tremendous growth. There are 150 companies in Canada licensed to to grow cannabis for medicinal and now recreational purposes. We see a lot of spin-offs in the economy, things you may not realize, but growing it is one thing. But you need to package it, you need to manufacture the oils, you need to distribute. You have different device companies now making ways to avoid smoking. So the peripheral economies around cannabis are enormous.
So as a doctor, how do they treat patients with the different strains? Is it oral? Yeah. Is it injected? What are you seeing?
The most popular type of preparation in Canada now is oil.
Okay.
So you take the flower, you do special extraction to get the cannabinoids. You can preserve those in an oil. You can take orally in capsules or in drops. And these oils can be standardized, so you know exactly what's in every single capsule. When I prescribe it for you, you would know exactly what you're getting. It's coming from a standard source. It's moving in this direction, much more like a medicine than it has ever been before.
Quite interesting. Great to meet you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both for having me on the show.
Dr. Mark Weir, family physician and researcher.